The Russian African Corps have been conducting intense ground operation in Nihono, in Modia, in Sevare, in Kidal region of Tandalahak, Tessalit, all over the territory. The Malian Armed Forces, they are carrying out a different type of operation, unlike anything I've seen since I've been studying the Sahelian counter-terrorism issue, right? And ladies and gentlemen, the momentum of the Malian Armed Forces with their ally Russian African Corps is undeniable. They are neutralizing a lot of terrorists of the JNIM and FLA sect. They are taking back territory. They are doing exactly what a sovereign military is supposed to do. And that is what the Malian Armed Forces are doing. But here is where it gets interesting. The more the Malian Armed Forces and their Russian ally win, the more they put the evidences out there of their victories. And, one of the funniest things is that this battle is going on in the bush. This battle is not even happening in civilian neighborhoods. This battle is happening in some isolated, desert of some forest. And the next thing, Western media, they try to clog the whole victory. They try to destroy the whole celebration. Because instead of acknowledging these victories, Western journalists and bloggers have rushed to tag this military operation that is a very, very big success. And I quote, they've called it possible war crime. I was going through the timeline today and I saw this Western, propaganda journalist platform they call ADF magazine, a magazine that is well consumed by pro-Western, garbage can men. They said the Malian Armed Forces and the Russian African Corps have not been winning. They said they are committing possible. That means they cannot ascertain war crimes. Now, the same people who have nothing, who have said nothing when terrorists bomb villages across the Sahel, for decades now, when terrorists ravage the entire area, they've said nothing. And suddenly they are very concerned about human rights across the Sahel region. Now that the African Corps and the Malian Armed Forces are winning, the Burkinabe Armed Forces are winning, the Nigerian Armed Forces are winning, they don't talk about it. Every time there is something to celebrate of, a sovereign African military success, the next thing you hear from those people is there is possibly a war crime or so, something they're about, and they activate their proxies, which definitely is funded by the West. So today we are going to be talking about a lot of things. All right, we're going to do something very comprehensive. We're going to break down the recent operation in Mali, what actually happened in Niono, in Mobti, in Modia, in Sevari Mobti. We are going to answer three questions. Why are Western governments so angry to answer these three questions? All right. Why are the Western governments so angry about the Malian Armed Forces success? Because they are definitely angry about it. And what does victory, all right, for Mali-Russian partnership, all right, what does it mean for Western interest in the Sahel and even across the continent of Africa? And ladies and gentlemen, the big one is, why are the Western media outlets trying to frame African military victory as possible war crimes? And are they trying to legitimize terrorism on the continent of Africa? When you have countries like Somalia not turning to Washington or Paris, now turning to Burkina Faso to ask for answers to their security threats that has been ever present with Al Shabaab. What they're supposed to be turning to Western partners, and they are turning to Burkina Faso. What does that tell you about what is currently going on with Western interest across the continent of Africa? So, if you are getting some value already, you can actually help us by hitting the like button. And I'm going to give you something I believe every African should know: 10 documented instances with dates and years where Western countries have used terrorist groups and armed proxies to destabilize sovereign nations for geopolitical control. All right. Because they will always tell you it's all about interest and control, not allegation. I'm talking about documented facts from history. So if you're watching the live, you can help us, give us a comment in the comments and tell us where you are watching from. Okay. So, with regards to what unfolded on the ground, let me give you the timeline about everything that have just happened before they start turning my words upside down. On July 4, 2026, insurgents group, they attacked Mali, they took different positions. The Malian Armed Forces fought back. They took those positions back from the jihadists, neutralized. Anafis was a canvas of, stones and, iron birds who were blowing bombs all over the place. The terrorists withdrew after days of heavy fighting. They were severely defeated. And according to the information that we received, the Malian Armed Forces and their Russian ally carried out what they call in French ratissage, which is when you have been able to mentally and physically discombobulate the enemy. You go in and you clean up everywhere, and you know what that cleaning is all about. The remnant of the terrorists, some of them that are still trying to survive, you go there and you blow them out of the water. So that is what the Malians did, and it was a phenomenal victory. Now, the Western media, the framing they always want to give to it is that, okay, they won, they took the position, they said, but 30 Malian soldiers fell. They always want to come with a negative narrative. And I want you to pay attention to this. The Western media immediately framed this as Mali being hit, by a name. Now, I want you to pay attention again to the name they gave the terrorist group. They call them rebels. They said rebel attack. They said Mali is being hit by a new wave of rebel attack. Are the Russians losing control? That's their narrative. They describe it as evidence of a failing state. But ladies and gentlemen, I want you to notice something. When a military successfully repel a coordinated multi-front attack and neutralize the attackers, that is not failure. That is called defense, and it is the right of every sovereign state. That is what the armies do. That is what they were born to do. All right, to defend your country regardless of the situation and circumstances and the trials and tribulations you are facing on the line of contact. You have to be there, do your job, make sure that people can go about their business. Now, then on July 2026, right, the 26th of that very year, just days ago, a joint unit of the Malian Armed Forces and the Russian African Corps conducted combat operation where they provided footage on the Russian African Corps Telegram channel. And if you want to see some of this footage, you can go to our Telegram channel. Till today, the videos are coming out. Ladies and gentlemen, it was a ground operation. A close combat footage was released from the cameras. The Russian African Corps, they severely suppressed the JNIM. Like, you can just see that these guys were breezing through the JNIM. They are the reconnaissance, surveillance, capabilities, giving them the precise movement and the location of the enemy support team and everything. And the Russians were just moving with good guidance, and they were just blowing through the JNI. Right there in that bush, they captured a lot of weapons like the AK-47 and the AK-103. It was a clean sweep. But, after the enemies were sober, they were very, very sad with that operation. You can see that these victories, the Western media did not even talk about it. All right. So now, the thing, according to African Corps, they said they personally neutralized at least 8 militants in Yono. Now, during those joint operation, according to the information that we have, the Russian African Corps and the Malian Armed Forces launched another clean sweep operation in a region called Mordia. Now, these engagements were taking place simultaneously. According to information that we're getting from open source, they said the Malian Armed Forces and the Russians are now going out on the offensive. You're not going to have military personnel holding barracks and all of that. No, they are now going out. Let them go and engage and fight the terrorists that are troubling Mali one-on-one. Like, if you have to meet us, you won't meet us in our barracks. No, we won't be sitting there waiting for you. Let's meet on the battlefield. And one thing that we have noticed about what is going on right now is that whoever looks for who first and whoever finds who first dictates the pace of the conduct on the battlefield. Because if you look at those footage, the JNIM were on the run. And, the Malian and the Russian African Corps were just, they were predating those boys all night. The reason is because the guys on the attack are always the ones that sees the guys, I mean, they always have the advantage. They have the morale. Because guess what? If you are sitting dogs and you suddenly hear bang, 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 like once something hits you and you are not prepared, you will never just be prepared. You know what I mean? So this is what the Russian and the Malian Armed Forces have been doing, and they've been doing this excellently. And this is not even happening in civilian region, right? But what the terrorist media are trying to tell us is that, oh, there is a possible war crime. I don't know what they mean by war crime. They can actually be speaking on behalf of the terrorist elements. They are the ones that came to Africa with this proposal of you can rehabilitate terrorists. You can that was where the name repentant Boko Haram came from. That was where the DDR, the repentant, the way you have repentant Boko Haram in Nigeria, you also have that project going on somewhere up north in Niger. This is a documented event, and it is because of the pressure from Western countries and there are organizations that Africans should no longer delete terrorists, that you should reintegrate them into the society after you must have rehabilitated. And we have seen that it does not work. It only emboldens the terrorists to even do more harm to civilians and even go with more impunity. All they have to do is to surrender and do their hands like this, and you have to capture them as if you're following the UN convention, and you just so it's not even helping the security architecture across Africa at all. So now they termed it as possible war crimes and crimes against humanity. I don't know what happened to humanity if you are taking out the terrorists that have just bombed village, that have just harmed the defense minister of a country. You celebrated it, but when the military goes out looking for those boys and taking them out, the next thing you say is crime on humanity. You can actually see the hypocrisy right there. So when Malian forces and Russian African Corps engage armed groups and delete them terribly, they always try to frame it and all of that. And they are even trying to give the Malian forces a new name now. But I won't call it yet. I want people to notice this name by themselves. So that's it, ladies and gentlemen, to understand why the Western capitals are uncomfortable with the Malian military success, you have to understand what the Sahel itself represents. Now, ladies and gentlemen, the Sahel is not just a conflict zone, like they're trying to tell you, all right? It's a corridor. It's a resource belt. Like it sits between the intersection of the Maghreb countries, which a lot of people call the North Africa, and the West African bloc. All right. So anybody that controls the Sahel controls the entire northern. If you cut Africa into two, from Central Africa up north, whoever controls the Sahel controls everything. If you know what I mean, you understand what is at stake here. Now, you see, and it is not just control, geopolitical, like it control on every angle, right? Either the states themselves control the country, either Western, whoever controls the Sahel. If the Sahelian can control the Sahel themselves, they project an enormous amount of power. They are going to rise not just because of their resources, they are going to rise because of their relevance, because of how important that belt is. Whoever controls the Sahel have access to uranium. And you know what uranium means in the present day geopolitics, where the Strait of Hormuz is closed and everybody is going to everybody is trying to get the nuclear energy once more. People want to escalate nuclear weapons. So you need uranium, right? Gold, the evergreen currency, right? So you control the Sahel, you control gold. You control the Sahel, you control lithium, clean energy. These are the resources that are going to dictate the next episode of global geopolitics. These resources are very, very consequential. You control oil. Niger's oil reserve, man. So this particular region, right, is a strategic trade belt. And since independence, I don't know if we can call it independence, right? This region has been under de facto Western, control since the colonial period. Now, the question a lot of people should ask is, are the West not tired? I don't know. You've been taking all these mineral resources since probably the 17th century or maybe 18th. It didn't happen in 19, definitely. So, and you developed your country, this old Paris thing and all of that. You took people forcefully from this region to fight your wars, to become your slaves. They built your country. Your country is beautiful today. Now in 2026, what other excuse do you have to still remain in this region? It's so simple. What other excuse do you have to remain in this region? There are certain explanations I'm supposed to do, but we've said it too many times on this platform. How they graduated from academic control to different type of control mechanism, and the new type of control mechanism is terrorism. If you look at everywhere all over the continent of Africa, where have you seen Western intervention in terms of aid, in terms of whatever intervention they want to do, the USAID or whatsoever? Where have you seen this intervention produce total military domination? I'm talking about total control of the situation in that country where there is no terrorism anymore. In Mali, and I quote, terrorism was around the northern part of Mali, but when MINUSMA and the rest came, it moved to central Mali during and after Operation Barkhane. But when the Russians came and they partnered with Mali, they drove the terrorists right to the border of Algeria in Tinzawantin. So we need to really, really analyze what is going on here. All right? You see, when France had Operation Barkhane deployed across the Sahel for nearly a decade, it was not just in Mali, Burkina Faso, Niger was involved too, and Chad to some very extent. From 2014 to 2022, ladies and gentlemen, terrorism did not decrease. It did not by a long shot. It increased, it multiplied. We started seeing we started seeing people coming from the Maghreb, people coming from Lebanon, people coming from Palestine. I mean, some of the most deadly individuals in the terrorism underworld, they started coming out in Mali. And a lot of them fell in Mali, ladies and gentlemen. There is a guy called Mukhtar Ben Mukhtar. This is one of the most dangerous terrorists on the planet. He fell in Mali. Abu Al-Anabi fell in Mali. I can't recall the number of commanders. I'm not talking about commanders whose terrorism tour revolves only around Mali. I'm talking about people that have been there, done it, hand the badge internationally. I'm talking about international terrorists. People who served with Osama bin Laden. People who served with Abu al-Zawahiri. Like, these guys served with the Messis and Ronaldo of terrorism. So you should know, why did they all surface in Mali all of a sudden? And now that all of them have been deleted, why are certain presidents traveling to Syria again? Maybe they want to go and get the new recruits, because you know what is definitely going on in Mali. So after the terrorists increased, it expanded seriously in Mali. It was getting out of control. Then Assimi Goïta came. And for the first time, with the new partnership, through the consultation of General Sadio Kamara at the time, they were able to push the terrorism from central Mali back to the north where it was. And for the first time, the Malian Armed Forces gained control to Kidal. Something they never had when the French, the Americans, the Brits, the Germans, the NATO forces were there. Let's just put it that way, to be precise. Spearheaded by the French forces, because, they believe that they have the autonomy of control when it comes to Francophone Afrique. But you know, a lot of people don't understand that when it comes to stealing from Africa, those people always unite. If they can all sit down on the table in the Berlin conference and split Africa like some cake, you definitely know that when it comes to Africa, they come together. Because balkanizing and destroying Africa and stealing from Africa is not just about one country's interests. What currency do they spend? They spend the same currency. They spend euro, right? That's what they spend. So injury to one is injury to all of them. So don't just think it's only France that is involved in this propaganda. And when you see certain people suddenly supporting you, you have to wait a minute and study. Are they really supporting? Because sometimes they be doing this thing just to get your attention. And once they get your attention, they show you who they truly are. So now, you see, at the end of the day, you don't need anybody's support. Africa needs to develop. Africa needs to understand. Africa needs to progress for Africa. So let that sink in. Nobody is your friend as an African person. Now, credit to the Malian authority. They saw this pattern. They recognized that Western counter-terrorism framework was not designed to defeat terrorism because they created it. They funded it. So their own security architectural framework was not created or designed to defeat terrorism. It was designed to manage it. And through that management, that is how they exert control. To keep it at a level that justify continued Western military presence. So they send occupying forces to your country to maintain Western occupation in that country. The Berlin Conference continues, ladies and gentlemen. But 3 countries have dared to break out from that construct, that colonial construct. And that's Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger. With the help of China, Russia. All right, so that is where we are at right now. So continued gathering and, continue control over the religion. And, when they control the region, they try to use their occupation force. They try to use the same terrorist attack. If something is about to happen to a government in the so-called democratic state, there is going to be multiple coordination and maybe multiple kidnapping. Maybe school children will be kidnapped and something. And all of these things with their media propaganda machine. Now listen, they will activate the terrorists to kidnap kids. And they will also activate the media propaganda machine to give some sort of publicity to it. Then the next thing, it directly influences the popular opinion of innocent people to be like, man, this guy can no longer rule us. No matter what his project and his agenda is, he cannot rule, he has lost control. So terrorism is not an enemy of the West. Terrorism has always been a tool and a friend of the West. What did Obama do after the kidnap of Chibok girls? Very close to the time when they were about to have the election in Nigeria, Obama actually came out on TV and told Nigerians, go out there and take up your destiny. And this happened just after the Chibok girls were kidnapped. And don't forget, we talked about Sheikh Gumi and how they have been sponsoring men like this for a long time. Do you know how many other people they have funded? And they will come in and they will intervene in the same place. We have a lot of known terrorists in Nigeria. The US strike did not kill them. They struck one guy that nobody, no single person in this entire world knows about. They gave him a code name. They called him, Abu al-Minuki. We neutralized the guy. We've been looking for him for a long time. And you believe in that nonsense. But Bello Toji, they didn't go after him. Ado Alero, they did not go after him. We know some of these guys that are supposed to be the number one priority target, they didn't go after them. So they just knock out one guy from God knows where, they named him Abu al-Minuki, and you fell for it. So this is the thing. They are not enemy. No, they are friends. They activate them when they need them. So now, credit to the Malian Armed Forces. All right. Mali made sovereign decisions at a time to solve the problem. They asked the French to leave their country. They asked MINUSMA, which is the United Nations mission, to leave their country. And they turned to Russia for a different kind of solution and partnership, not a sort of a patron-client relationship, right? It was a military tech cooperation. And here's what changed. Within 2 years, the African Corps presence, you know, was established in the Malian territory. The Malian military captured Kidal with the help of the African Corps, a town that the Tuareg rebels had controlled for nearly a decade. That's 10 good years plus. They have expanded military operations into the area where previously were no-go area, all right? Now, they continue to conduct ground operation and ground maneuvers, and they were simply purging their territories from this element until the West looked at it that what could they do? They activated the Ukrainian proxy to work with the fact that they have some conflict with Russia, where the West put some intelligence, media, a lot of machineries was placed to help put in place to help the Tuareg, where they were able to attack the Russian units that almost claimed the entire territory of Mali off of these guys. We saw it, the video, we saw how it happened, we saw how it went down. And God bless the family of those brothers. Malian soldiers, Russian African Corps. So you have to understand, the West, they want Russia to fail so bad. Because let's come to think of it. Africa is going towards sovereignty. But I can assure you of one thing. Without the alternative partners, Africa would have talked about sovereignty for nothing. All right? Because of the alternative partners, that is why Africa is talking about sovereignty today. There would have been no sovereignty. So, and there have always been this alternative partner. That is why a weak Russia is the biggest ask of the West till tomorrow. Because Russia historically has always been that alternative partner that have been able to check and balance the West from carrying out their nefarious military campaign and terrible agenda across the world. Now, ladies and gentlemen, a stable, secured Sahel under sovereign African governments that control their own resources, make their own decision, set their own alliance, and set their own terms, all right, is the worst case scenario for the international order that was built by the West, all right? They can no longer extract their resources. They can no longer create political dependency, like they do for African leaders, like they are doing for Sonko currently, that they are doing for Diomaye Faye currently, sorry. The West is not angry because of the human rights, whatever they are complaining. The West is angry because they are losing control. They are angry because they are seeing videos where Malian citizens are beginning to speak the Russian language. They are beginning to get angry when Malian citizens no longer speak French. They no longer speak French again. They are now beginning to speak Bambara. They are speaking the Jula. They are speaking their local language. The West is getting angry because the Malians are beginning to see through the deceit. And I get it. You will be hurt too if you are the West, where your entire existence, your entire, propaganda have always depended on those people's sovereign wealth. You will definitely, you should be angry. It's about your interest, all right? And that interest, they are losing it right now, and they are losing control. If they have not even lost it completely, because I do know that by the time the currency goes out of the window, everything is over. Just close the shop and let everybody go home. By the time the CFA franc get dusted from the Sahel, it's all over. Close the shop, no more market, everybody goes home. And I just want you to know, Niger is currently not selling uranium to the West. This is the level, this is how big the line is. A line has been drawn, but a lot of people don't, you have not been able to appreciate the width of that line. Niger is so tough with that decision to the point that they're not even selling their uranium to the West. And I called something out some months back. I said initially, the pretext, France was going to World Bank, they were reporting Niger to everybody. They were saying that the uranium that they mined and the process when they were in Niger is under the Nigerian custody and Niger needs to give it back to them. But ladies and gentlemen, a lot of people were complaining. I saw a lot of bloggers and a lot of, they were just following the bandwagon. Niger, the president of Niger is holding down, the French, uranium and all of that. Then President Abdurrahman Chiani did something. He said, I'm going to transport the uranium to your doorstep for free. We have a lot of it. We have it in abundance. Don't worry, we're going to transport it. And we did not hear no noise again. From the World Bank, from whatsoever, we did not hear no noise again. Did you understand the game? They were trying to use the whole conversation of that uranium to exert political pressure. Niger saw it. And they came with the solution. You want it? We're going to give it to you. We don't need it. And you did not hear no noise again. So what's the problem? The problem is the thief that came to steal, to kill, and to destroy and stay is being told to leave. There are levels to robbery. Some robbers come and they go, some stays. So the robber that came to rob you and stayed, something must happen for that robber to leave you alone. You have to take out that robber. It's as simple as that. A lot of people, this is the truth that a lot of people don't want to accept. A robber that came to your house, robbed you, and ran away has another day to tell the story. But a robber that came to rob you and stayed only wants one thing: domination. And how do you counter the domination? Is to completely take out the robber. You can't chase a robber that feels like it's right for him to stay because it's in your domain. So you have to knock out that robber completely. No more. That's the only time you have peace. So this is a situation that we are going through right now. So I want you to think about this. When was the last time you saw a major Western newspaper celebrate an African military victory against terrorists? I will wait. You cannot find it from God knows where. Because in their framework, African forces are supposed to be recipients of Western assistance, of Western aid. That is why you hear them say Burkina Faso is the Burkinabe government is cutting Burkina Faso away from Western support. They won't call it Western support, they call it international support. So when they say international support, let me break something down to you. A lot of people don't understand when the West mention international. When they mention international, they are not talking about us. They are not talking about some people. They are talking about Germany, France, Britain, and the United States with New Zealand and a very few entities. That's what they are talking about. When they say international, when they say the world, they are talking about them. And every other thing comes under. So, to be honest with you, it's a world where they try to create dependency. Because without dependency, they are irrelevant. This is the cold truth. They talk about Western technology. They talk about Western this, Western that. The question you should ask, are there no alternative? Why are they sponsoring certain people to tell you that whatever you do, whatever you have, whatever technology you've built, whatever you wear that is indigenous is terrible? If you go to Nigerian markets, you will hear them say, oh, this one is London. This one is local made. and the price of the foreign one goes up, and the price of the local one is so down. And in the mindset of a young black kid, right, he believes that because the price of the local one is down, definitely it's terrible. And they don't buy it. And sometimes the manufacturer becomes so stupid that they will have to create something by themselves, and they will tag it with the name of the West. It is the level of colonization. And a lot of people don't understand this. That is why when I go to the market, I ask the traders, what do you sell? If he tells me, when he mentions London, Paris, and all that, I'll be like, no, I'm not buying from you. And you are a very bad person for even telling me. Why are you mentioning those names? Because you think I'll patronize you because you mentioned those names. What have you made? That is why I came to the market. I did not come to see when I see London on your shirt or Britain and all of that, I just get that thing out of my face. I'm a Nigerian. All right? I'm an African. I wear my identity on my sleeves. I'm not trying to be another person because you will never be them. Don't try to be, it's a waste of time. But a lot of people will never listen. It's just their choice to be. If certain people can call themselves the slaves of certain people, they are happy to call themselves. So why are you trying to fight for them? All right. So now they are very scared that African countries that are supposed to be recipient of Western assistance, not, architects of their own security framework, they are afraid that these African countries are beginning to step up. Burkina Faso is beginning to step up. Do you know where African countries travel to when they have security issue? They go to Washington. they travel out of the continent completely for medical care, for anything. Africans are so, look, there is a curse on Africa. I have to be honest with you at this point. Do you know why your politicians travel out? Even if there are modern medical facilities with all products available, with all itineraries available. Do you know why? Do you know that most of the doctors that carry out surgery outside the country are from Africa? Do you know? In my hospital, the National Orthopedic, most of our consultants they work for fewer hours a year. Most of their hours is in the UK, in France, in Germany. Every day they come in and go out like what I don't know. And they are going to be the ones to operate on some of these politicians that are traveling out for medical care. And they have the same facility here. But why is it that your politician travel out every time? There is a particular construct to continue to make you think whatever you do is useless. Whatever, as long as it's in Africa, it's not good enough. That is why you have a lot of people, they prefer to spend their billions outside the country than build more facilities here. So it's a construct. It's part of the agreement. These are the things you must do. Not because they saw, they discover that it's valuable or something. No. Why is it that nearly all your politicians do these things? Have you asked your questions? When have you seen Ibrahim Traore going to France or to anywhere to go and take treatment? You've never seen that happen. Not Assimi Goïta, not Abdurrahmani Chiani. This is why they hate this man. Now, let's address the most disturbing aspect of this entire situation, ladies and gentlemen. I will not waste your time, all right? Many Western bloggers and journalists have tagged the Malian Forces victory and the African Corps. They've called it war crime and crime on human rights. They've, the Global Watch, the Global R2P, Right to Protect, and Western media, and Western-funded NGOs have published reports from God knows where, and they will just say an anonymous, they will always say an anonymous person, gave us this report. All right. So they have been accusing the FAMa and the African Corps. Now, let me be very clear. And I'm not saying that every single action that is taken by every soldier in every engagement will be perfect. It will never be perfect. It will never be perfect. There was a situation right inside that particular Nioro where the Russians were engaging the JNIM. Man, that was a different level entirely. Are you aware that they were engaging the JNIM and some of the Russian personnel right in within the exchange, they were chasing some the JNIM. Some Russian personnel were chasing some JNIM and opening fire on them, and the whole place was chaotic, right? And I was asking myself, and nobody stopped. It was like, what? Like, and I was like, how are they able to make sure? I know they're trained for it. That why your brother is running after another JNM personnel, you don't clip him by mistake. These men are trained to function under pressure. But sometimes, even the best of personnel, they can make mistakes. These things are top secret. Nobody tells you about these things, right? So, war is chaotic. Mistakes happen in every conflict, on every side. But what I'm asking you to notice is the asymmetry. Let me be very clear. When Western forces conduct operations in Afghanistan, in Iraq, in Syria, when drone strike kills civilians, when convoy fire on vehicles at checkpoints, when the Israeli aircraft hit some Lebanese journalists, all right, the Western media call it tragic mistakes. They call it collateral damage. They tell you that they are investigating. The strike on the Minab schoolgirls. What did the US tell you? They said they were investigating. Have they come out with the result? And you know, they will not call it out. All right. They don't call for their own government to be referred to the International Criminal Court. They don't do it. Are you aware that Chad has also filed their documentation to withdraw from the International Criminal Court? And that court by the day is becoming more useless. One thing I want you to pay attention to, it started in the Sahel. And that is why they hate the Sahel. Because they believe if they can do it, they will only embolden their brothers across the continent to want to adopt the same strategy. Because if their thought process that because Burkina Faso and Mali and Niger can do it, it will embolden other Africans to want to do it. All right. Thank you so much, Mr. Swall. Thank you so much. Why would Somalia come to Burkina Faso if the process is not functioning properly? So this is what scares the West. Because if Africa can wake up and take the initiative, the Western-led dependency economy, because it's an economy on its own, is going to get out of the window. If you get out of the window, what happens to the Western economy? That weak economy, what happens to it? Because it's weak, it's only a facade. You can't see through. So tell me, if all African countries say no today, what will happen? If 3 countries across the Sahel said no to France, and France is like that. So if all African countries say no, what do you think will happen? Now, you see, to be honest with you, when African security, when they hit people that are burning villages, that are kidnapping school children, and attacking military position, all right, suddenly the language shifts to possible. When they say possible war crime, it means they're not definitive with it. They don't have the facts. But it is not about what I think, because I'm smart enough to know that they are only putting out the propaganda. It is what they want a naive African person to believe. Possible war crime. It is about the popular opinion they want to push out there. It's part of the psyop. The same organization that could not find the time to document terrorist atrocities for 10 years now have entire investigative units dedicated to African military operation. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm not going to say something. I want, I want you to really sit with this information. The narrative is not about protecting civilians in Africa. All right? It is about delegitimizing African military success. If I hit a terrorist today and tomorrow somebody said that terrorist is a civilian, do you know that at some point when I see a terrorist, I might start second guessing that, man, am I sure this guy is not a civilian? Even though you know, that's the chaos they're trying to create. A chaos when you second guess yourself and you ask yourself, am I good enough to take that shot? Bro, you are good enough. You are good enough. You have the political support of the people to go out there and get the job done. Because if you can frame every African military victory as a war crime, then you can argue that African governments are not fit enough to provide their own security. You can argue that Western forces need to come back to Africa. Just on that framing. So you should get the importance of the framing. Because if you can say that African soldiers are getting shielded, even if that is not true, you can say that they need Western intervention, they need help, they need aid. If you can create a certain name from God knows where, if you can tell your jihadists to go to some environment where no civilian exists and open blank shots and give the propaganda video, leave the rest to their Western propaganda machinery and say, oh my God, look at how they are moving around and doing a lot of things. It creates fear. That's the psyop, ladies and gentlemen. So if they can do all those things, they can argue that there is a need for them to come back, thinking that African civilians will be stupid enough to revolt against dishonorable governments. You can argue that sanctions should be imposed, like they did on Sadio Kamara. They lifted the sanction to catch Mali by surprise. They can always argue that, okay, they are harming civilians, so aids need to be caught, that recognition, international recognition should be withheld. So the question is, are they trying to legitimize terrorism in Africa? That's one question that somebody asked me yesterday, and I said it's important for me to point out. I will not say they are consciously sitting in a room saying, let us legitimize terrorism. But the effect of their narrative is to create a moral equivalence between terrorists who deliberately target civilians and soldiers who are fighting to protect those civilians. When you label counter-terrorism operation as war crime, you are saying, whether you intend to or not, that there is no legitimate way for an African military personnel or African military as a whole to defend its people. That every bullet fired in defense of a sovereign country in Africa is a violation. That the only acceptable scenario is for African nations to remain dependent on Western security framework. That's the narrative they're trying to put out there. And family, let me tell you something. They're trying to say that Africa as a whole has no right to do anything for themselves. When African countries try to refine raw materials themselves, what does that do to the unipolar framework? Because the manuscript of the unipolar framework is that Africa is supposed to be that country, that continent that provide the raw materials without value. So what happens when Africa say, let us refine it and bring and get the real value? What happens? A lot of African leaders have brought up this idea. Why is it that the idea always disappears? Why is it that you start hearing some people just standing up and saying different things in their country? So the plot is very, very deep. And ladies and gentlemen, this is colonialism. It is just wearing human rights label this time around. It is colonialism. You can call it neo-colonialism, you can call it whatever, but this is colonialism still there. Even if it has been knocked out, that arrogance, that hubris, will, yeah. But this is 2026. According to information from multiple sources, and I encourage you to verify this, the allegations against African Corps include claims about incidents near Zaro in June 2026. But what the report do not tell you is the broader context. These areas have been under sustained terrorist pressure for years. The operations are happening in active combat zone, where you cannot distinguish between combatant and civilian, because the terrorists have deliberately embedded themselves within civilian populations. But the Western framework does not make this distinction, because the goal is not accuracy. The goal is the narrative control. I've posted a video here before of a place in Borno State and Zamfara State where bandits move around, they go to eateries, and the civilians there want to take selfies with them. They celebrate bandits there. This particular scenario play out in different places. And why do you have this scenario where civilians are taking selfies with bandits? It is because the West have equally planned to have Islamic clerics like the likes of Sheikh Gumi that will tell the kids that, you see these bandits, they are carrying out the work of Allah. That they are carrying out the work of Almighty Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala. That is it. Because this is deep. And it takes real attention and calm to really, really understand how deep it goes. It's a long travel, but it has an end. Patience, perseverance, hard work, dedication, discipline. It will be taken out. Now, the Western framework does not always make this distinction, because their goal is never to inform you accurately. Their goal is to misinform, to twist, carry out some grotesque narrative, just to make sure that they control the mind of what the public opinion is about certain situation. So I promised at the beginning of this video that I'm going to give you 10 verifiable dated events and instances where Western powers armed, funded, and trained or directly supported armed groups, including terrorist organizations, to destabilize sovereign nation for geopolitical control. Today is not the day where we are going to talk about how they fund religious organizations. I'm not talking about Islam here. I'm talking about both. That day is coming, but not today. All right. But number one, let's talk about Afghanistan in 1979 to 1989. The CIA launched Operation Cyclone, the largest covert operation in the history at the time. The United States, through CIA and with the help of Saudi Arabia, matching funds, armed and financed the Afghan Mujahideen against the Soviet-backed government. Total cost approximately $3 billion, more than all other CIA covert operations in the 1980s combined. The result, the Mujahideen fractured after the Soviet Union withdrawal. Elements of those US-backed fighters became the Taliban. Others became Al-Qaeda, the very terrorist infrastructure that would later attack the United States on September 11, 2001, if they have you believe that. was incubated with American money and American weapons. This is not speculation, this is documented history. Number 2, the Contras in Nicaragua, 1979 to 1990. The CIA funded, trained, and directed the Contras rebel against the Sandinist government of Nicaragua. The Contras were responsible for widespread attack on civilian infrastructure, health clinics, school, agricultural cooperatives. The International Court of Justice ruled in 1986 that the United States had violated international law by supporting the Contras, like they are supporting the RSF now, and mining Nicaragua harbors. The US was ordered to pay reparation. It refused. When Congress cut off funding, the Reagan administration infamously sold weapons to Iran to secretly continue financing the Contras, the Iran-Contra affair. If you type it on Google, if you type it on any search engine, you are going to see it. Number 3, Angola, UNITA, 1975 to 2002. The United States and apartheid South Africa backed Jonas Savimbi UNITA rebel movement against the Soviet and Cuban-backed MPLA government. UNITA waged a brutal civil war that killed an estimated 500,000 people. The Reagan administration lobbied to repeal the Clark Amendment, which had prohibited covert aid to Angolan rebels, so they could continue funding Savimbi UNITA. Signature tactics was to use landmines, which continue to kill and maim Angolan civilians to this day. Till this day, from 1975. The US supported this group for nearly 3 decades. That is if they are not still supporting some groups in Angola to this day. NATO, Libya, 2011. NATO led by France, the United Kingdom, and the United States. You know, when I said international the other time, I gave you the names of these countries, right? Because of the hubris. Now, provided air support, weapons, and logistic backing rebel groups seeking to overthrow Muammar Gaddafi. The intervention was authorized under the guise of protecting civilians. That is the lie. That's the psyop. That's the propaganda. But quickly became a regime change operation. The result, Libya collapsed into chaos. The country became a haven for armed militias, human trafficking network, and terrorist group, including ISIS affiliates. The very weapon that NATO countries supplied to Libya rebels flooded across to the Sahel, into Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger, which are fighting against the problem that was created by the West in 2011. Harming the same terrorist group that African forces are fighting today. The whole cancer, the polyp stage of that cancer started with the US, the United Kingdom, Britain, and you know, France, and all those other countries whose name I will not mention. Syria 2011, till this day. The United States alongside the Gulf states, which Iran is currently bombing, including Saudi Arabia. Are you people aware of how many times they've mentioned Saudi Arabia? So those of you that believe that, oh, Saudi, yeah, whatever, you know, Saudi Arabia and Qatar funded and armed multiple Syrian rebel factions against the government of Bashar al-Assad. Weapons supplied through CIA, Timber SICOM program, one of the largest covert armament operations in CIA history, and ended up in the hand of extremist groups including Al-Qaeda affiliate Jabhat al-Nusra. Jabhat al-Nusra. And you have one al-Nusra in Burkina Faso, in Mali, and in Niger. They call them JNIM. They call them Al-Qaeda affiliates. Are you aware that in all this Western-led operation, there is always Al-Qaeda that is being mentioned? So get the game, don't fall for the rhythm. Now, ended up in the hand of extremist group, including the Al-Qaeda affiliates. They always call them Al-Qaeda affiliates. Get the game. Now, a 2017 study by Armed Conflict Armament Research Group documented the US manufactured anti-tank weapons were being used by ISIS. The destabilization of Syria created a refugee crisis that European nations are still dealing with. and allow ISIS declare a caliphate in Syria. And the leader of that terrorist group is now the current president of Syria. Now let's talk about France and the Rwandan genocide, 1990 to 1994. This one is difficult for Africa family. France provided military training, weapons, and diplomatic cover to the Hutu-led government of Juvenal Abiramimana, all right, before and during, thank you so much, Mr. Swad, during 1994 genocide against the Tutsi. French forces trained the Himoumawe militia that carried out the killings. When the genocide was underway, France launched Operation Turquoise, officially an humanitarian mission, but which a commission of French historians in 2021 determined allowed genocide to escape into Zaire. All right, the people that killed through the help of France were able to, escape into Zaire. The Rwandan government has repeatedly stated that France bears significant responsibility. President Macron himself acknowledged that France overwhelmingly was responsible in 2021. That was what Emmanuel Macron said. That was the performance of France in Rwanda. Mozambique, 1977 to 1992. RENAMO was created by the Rhodesian Intelligence Service and later adopted by apartheid South Africa as a proxy force to destabilize Mozambique Frelimo government. RENAMO tactics include deliberate targeting of civilians. So if you see that certain groups are targeting civilians, you know who sent them. It is not today, it is not yesterday that they've been targeting civilians. So don't let anybody lie to you and tell you that, oh, Muslims are killing Christians in certain places and they want to come and help you out. They created these groups by themselves. They trained them. Yeah, they are your own citizens. They behave very dumb, but they train them. They fund them. You see, the whole terrible ideology you are seeing on this day is not the work of, it's not a 365-day work. These are decades. Like they have been manufacturing this machinery for more than 3 decades in some country. And when they get to the operational stage, everybody start talking. No, it has been there for a very long time. And they have different sleeper machineries. That when the situation is trying to turn, those people will start speaking up to give them political backup. This thing has layers, it has levels. Now, that is why when Burkina Faso President Captain Ibrahim Traore started knocking out all these people I'm pointing at right now, they said he is trying to oppress the freedom of speech in Burkina Faso. Guess what? Captain Ibrahim Traore is identifying those that are operating with them and is knocking them out. So, RENAMO's tactics included deliberate targeting of civilians, massacres, amputations, destruction of schools and health posts. An estimated 1 million people died in the resulting civil war. South Africa's apartheid regime funded this group specifically because Mozambique had provided sanctuary to the African National Congress, ANC, a sovereign African nation, was punished with terrorist insurgency because it supported the liberation of Black South Africans. And those Black South Africans that were liberated are telling Mozambicans to leave their country today. I just know why I didn't want to talk about the South African issue. I have my personal reason. Now, the Congo crisis, 1960 to 1965. Following the Congolese independence from Belgium, the United States and Belgium backed Moise Tobe secessionist movement in mineral-rich Katanga province. The CIA under President Eisenhower worked to remove Patrice Lumumba, Congo first democratically elected prime minister, because his Pan-Africanist and non-aligned stance was seen as a threat to Western mining interests in Congo. Lumumba was captured, tortured, executed in January 1961 with Belgian and CIA complicity, after which his body was dissolved in acid. Because of the fear that a return of Lumumba is possible. So they had to dissolve his body in a whole bowl of acid. The Congo fell into decades of dictatorship under Mobutu Sese Seko, who was staunch US ally, which was characterized by looting the country's resources with the help of the US. Now, that one aside, right? Chad and Sudan proxy war, 2005 to 2010, which is still currently going on right now as we speak. The United States and France, be looking at the names of the country we are mentioning, right? They play both sides of Chad and Sudan conflict for years. When it suited Western interests, Chadian rebels were harmed and supported to pressure the Sudanese government. When the calculus shifted, the Western support flowed in the opposite direction. The net effect was sustained instability in a region that sits atop significant oil reserve. It's always about certain resources. Now, with a French military base in Jamena serving as the anchor, the civilian cost was enormous. Displacement, famine, and entrenchment of armed groups that continue to operate across the Sahel today. So whatever you are seeing in Mali, Burkina Faso today is as a result of different geopolitical escalation in different regions. Now, let's talk about the last one. The Cuba, Operation Mongoose, and Cuba exile terrorism in 1961 to 1965. Following the failed CIA operation called the Bay of Pigs invasion, where a lot of US personnel were captured, which was planned and executed by the CIA using Cuban exiles, the Kennedy administration launched Operation Mongoose in November 1961. This was a sustained campaign of sabotage, psychological warfare, like they're doing in Africa right now, and terrorist attack against Cuban exiles, trained and funded by the CIA. Bombed hotels, theaters, and Cuban airline in 1976 that killed 73 people. The goal was to destabilize the Cuban Revolution and assassinate Fidel Castro, a sovereign leader whose crime was choosing socialist paths 90 miles from Florida. Ladies and gentlemen, multiple times the US tried, multiple times the US failed. Until the very, very last day, the US was not able to defeat Cuba. Until now, they have not forgotten their mission. So like I tell you, the children of certain people, they carry the behavioral psychology of their ancestors. They never change. So you mention certain president, you mention certain people, you mention name, you talk about the things they've done, but people want to tell you to grow thick skin that you no longer exist in the 19th century. But these are the children of people that they attacked Cuba back then, trying to take out Fidel Castro. Are they not attacking Cuba today through Donald Trump? A lot of people used to ask me, why is it that every US president always wage war on behalf of the US deep state? It will be a conversation for another day, not today. So if you look at all the crises now, you can actually articulate it back to one particular block, the Western Unipolar bloc. So when you see someone behead, now in most of this operation, you can see that amputation was involved, right? So when you see certain people that chop off some body part and they shout Allahu Akbar, these people have been trained by the CIA for years. They need something that will politically resonate within that region, depending on which religion is more prominent, is more dominant. In Mali, they will call it an attack on Muslims. In Burkina Faso, they said the president is trying to attack the religious rights of Muslims. In Nigeria, they will tell you it's the Christians that are under, attack. But meanwhile, they will be the one to come. You see, this thing is like, I created a genetically engineered mosquito to bite you, to put something in your body. And just around the time when the mosquito is spilling some sporozoids into your body, I'm walking about and I'm telling you, like, do you need my help? That is the situation. Like, I know that the mosquito will do something. Then I'm passing and be like, well, anybody needs my help right there? Somebody needs my help. I'm available now. I'll soon leave. That's the situation, ladies and gentlemen. They are always involved in every crime. They fund it. They do the training. They supply the weapon. They give the propaganda machinery. And that is why certain people are stupid enough to believe that I speak for African people that wants to be free today. They call it Russia propaganda. Don't you believe that anybody that thinks that way is still living in 1901? For you to believe that our love for our own, get that statement, that the love that we have for our own cannot be genuine. Do you know why they believe and they are arrogantly still standing on that fact that when we say we support certain people that is not Western aligned, it has to be Russia propaganda? It is because they have placed enough machinery in place. And this colonization, it has been going on for a very long time, that they believe that it will never be possible for African people to stand up to them and tell them that we love certain people that are Africans. You are not supposed to like an African person. That is why in every country you have certain people still hating on certain people. That is why in Nigeria you will have an Igbo person say Yorubas are Yariba and Hausas are like terrorists or bandits, and an Hausa person will tell you they don't like Iyamiri, and Yoruba will do their own. Because you as a black man, everything have been designed for you to see yourself as the danger. For you to stay at home, you cannot relate with your neighbors. Do you know why the terrorist is pretty much overrunning everybody? Some people, ever since the day they were born, they've never left their streets. They've never is from your house to go and get something back to your house. When we were growing up, in fact, there is no bush in my environment that I didn't comb. Till the age of 20, there is no forest that I did not comb. Like with my foot. But you have some kids, they barely know the neighbor, like they were born there. So you are meant to see every African that is next to you as a potential threat. And Africans have been so manipulated with a lot of manufactured capabilities to put African, back in themselves. And it has been so effective. Where a Muslim that is so misguided will see a Christian and say it's a kafiri. Even though the people that are putting your life in harm's way, they are very, very proximal to you. But once the people that are trying to defend you are people that are not of your religion, you will call them kafri, and you will say you prefer to die at the hands of those terrorists that pray in the mosque with you than to have a kafri come and defend you. Is that, you see, there is a saying in my community that when your skull does not, any skull that does not carry a good brain should be taken off. Because, when the brain is not in the skull, what's the essence of the skull in the first place? So there's a lot of decolonization that needs to take place. Where, I mean, there's a lot going on, and today is not for the conversation is not now. My dad told me some things. I respect my dad till tomorrow, and I respect every elders that came before me, and I continue to say these things. But we don't have to agree with everything. My dad used to say certain things too. But when I grew up, I just knew, like, man, this thing cannot work with me. But my dad, and I remember his words. Those words will remain with me long after he is gone. See, these people so destroyed Africa to the point that when you shout Jesus, right, the thing that comes to your head immediately is the picture of a white person. Why? Like, so when you shout Jesus, it's a white man that comes to your head, but you don't know. But in some people's mental, the picture of the devil or Satan or whatever, they always, I don't know where they got that information from. They believe that devil is something ugly and it must be black. So, see, there is so much machineries that have been put in place to make a black person hate a black person for no reason. So, look at movies when they talk about orcs. This mystic, go and type it on, is a mystic being that does not exist. Do you know the color they give to orcs? They give it black. It's a signature. Everything they do, they try to destroy the black identity. And this, you must reject. It is not my duty to help you reject that. My duty is to give you the awareness you need to put yourself in the right position. So, these things have been going on for a long time. But it is your job now to decolonize yourself. Because if you are not special, why are they interested in Burkina Faso? Why are they suddenly interested in once upon a time the poorest country on the continent of Africa? Why is it that every speech that comes out of the mouth of Ibrahim Traore is a problem? If they were so special, why is it that they cannot sleep or wake up or do anything? Oh, what has Ibrahim Traore said today? If a black man is not special. So if you still believe that a black man is not special, then it's you that needs to stop deceiving yourself. I will have to drop the curtain here, ladies and gentlemen. I do not want to continue to pour because I can continue for the next, I don't know. So I think I just need to round it up right here and let everybody go. I really want to appreciate your time. I don't take it for granted, but this will not stop because the difference between us and the people that, you know, they found it, they got inspired and they want to do it, you know, there's a lot of difference here. We love what we do. We love the African project. We are going to be here long after a lot of this Western intelligent proxy assets are going to be off the journey of those world. They told you that the world was going to be destroyed in year 2000, and I remember year 2000. I was looking at myself like, where, how is the cloud going to open and I'm going to disappear? Right? We're still so much colonized at the time. They said we should be praying that end time is here. It never came, ladies and gentlemen. The war did not go away. I ask a lot of people questions. They say when you die, when I was studying Islamic studies in secondary school, they say when we die, immediately some minutes after, angel Jubri and one other angel will come and there will be this and they will judge you and this. Bro, nobody is going. So I keep asking a question that, okay, if our spirit goes up from our body, where, like the cows, all these animals that behave almost like human beings that we kill, you know, don't they have spirits? They have the same organs with us, right? But they don't have spirits. Like their spirit, what happens to those spirits? Who judges the guy that died in a very serious accident? The guy that gets dissolved in acid, right? You say they bury people inside the ground, right? And Angel Jubri is gonna come. So Lumumba that got dissolved in an acid, what happens? Who judges Lumumba? There is a lot of things, and you know, you have to be very, very somehow for you to follow certain narrative. That is why they will tell you that you cannot understand the things of the spirit. That's what they will tell you. That is what they will tell you. that you don't question it. It means you don't have to think. Religion is the only place where you are not supposed to think. You are supposed to follow. Because you're supposed to think like a bandit. So, ladies and gentlemen, I really appreciate your time. And I really want to say thank you. I proudly represent my people, African people, and I'm proudly Yoruba. That is why my name is Oluwabumi. And a lot of people are saying the Bumi and they're asking why did it change? I am not Android. Android is a code name. All right? It's a code name. So Bumi is my real name. So the Yoruba people on the platform knows what the name sounds like. They know the meaning. That is my father's name. That is also my name. So, ladies and gentlemen, I wear that pride on my sleeve every day, confidently, and I bring to you the news of liberation. So, if you enjoyed the video, kindly do well to help us hit the like button before you depart from our maze, and help us hit the subscribe button, because if you don't, you definitely know that Android is gonna cry. See you tomorrow, and I pray that they are going to violate again, because if they do, we are going to demonstrate again. If they leave us alone, at this point, we will not leave them alone. You see, my friend, let me tell you this. Even if the West leave us tomorrow, if they leave us alone, we will not leave the West alone. So if you're a Western asset, you are listening to me, let me just tell you something. My friend, I will not leave you alone. Thank you.